I had had enough.
Well, you drove out there into the middle of nowhere and had some sort of loud verbal display challenging ET in general out in the middle of nowhere?
That's what I was doing. I actually had a pistol in my hand at the time. I was really ticked off. When I was having this fit, I was waving the gun in the air, okay, and I had this fit. And at this moment, I said, okay.
He was a Louisiana man named Montaldo. Folks around called him Six Gun Joe. Worked with ICAR, don't you know? Investigating UFOs. Out for a drive with a gal one night, they stopped to check out the reporting site. When an alien lit right there on the ground, commenced to throwing his weight around. Now, old Six Gun didn't take too kindly to that kind of thing, especially without Vaseline or anything like that, you know. Seriously. Well, Six Gun looked that critter right in the eye and said, "Any last wish before you die?" Yo, reached for his gun, quick as a twitch, and said, "Fill your claw, you son of a bitch." Now a legend spread across the land about this pistol-waving man. But if you're from space or from Earth below, you don't give no lip to Six Gun Joe.
Tune in to UFO Undercover, Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, with your host, Joe Montaldo, right here on the Paranormal Radio Network. Welcome to UFO Undercover, with your host, Joe Montaldo.
We have a lot of stuff where
Welcome to UFO Undercover, with your host, Joe Montaldo.
Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone's having a good afternoon, a good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are on our beautiful blue planet. Guys and girls, I know I say this every week, but I love doing this show because we go out across every time zone on the planet. Every time. We don't miss any time zones. We have someone listening in every time zone on Earth right now, which, by the way, I want to tell all y'all thanks ahead of time because I do enjoy it out there. And for the people who are staying up and listening to us early in the morning or late in the evening, thanks, guys. I mean, it's really cool. Cause I know, some of our UK audience and our US audience, it's between 1 and 3 in the morning for y'all. And I know y'all are staying up, and I can see the server numbers. So I know y'all are listening and enjoying the show. So, again, thanks for all my friends down in Australia who I know are taking their afternoon tea time to check us out on the radio. I appreciate that. Well, and for all of our American listeners and South American listeners, guys, it's just always great to have y'all on board. Tonight's guest is going to be Nadine Lalich, and actually, I've been hearing about Nadine off and on for years. It's not the first time I've interviewed, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. There is another archive tape up there that y'all can go find. But still, I find it to be very, very interesting. Now, also, before we even get started, for any of you who would like to catch up with this conversation, you can go over to alienexperiences.com. And a lot of Nadine's work, a lot of information about Nadine is right there on the site, so you can get in, take a good look at the site. That way, when you get into the conversation later on, if you want to put a comment, if a question, you know what you're talking about. Nadine, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Why don't you let me get you to tell the audience a little bit about yourself and why you're involved in all of this. Go ahead.
Well, I was dragged kicking and screaming into this research. Actually, I am a reluctant experiencer, but I'm happy to say after about 10 years now of being actively involved, I've moved through all of the anger and the fear, and now I'm just absolutely committed to unraveling the mystery as much as I can. And so after a very startling conscious contact in Sedona, Arizona in 1991, that sort of opened the doorway for me, and tucked it under my bed and hid it away, the experience, for about 15 years until finally in 2005, I'd had enough of the experiences, and I sought out some assistance and some camaraderie through MUFON, where I met Barbara Lamb, and in very short order, within a couple of years, we did the book Alien Experiences together, and now I'm in hook, line, and sinker into this great mystery.
Well, it's definitely a great mystery. There's no doubt about that. As much time and money as so many of us put into this, it's kind of nightmarish to actually think about it sometimes. Now, so I mean, but for you were just going on through life. I mean, you knew about this one experience in your life, but you just, like I said, I heard you say you kind of buried it, you put it away, you put it night for a while, and you just went on with life. Now, what I wanted to ask you here is, was there like a nagging sensation? I mean, was there an overwhelming, what was it that actually drug you back, I guess is what I'm looking for, or drug you into the field is what I'm looking for. I mean, I know the experience is what it is, but what along the line of, I guess, in time actually pushed you back into that direction? Because I know a lot of people, like you said, fight this kicking and screaming because they don't even want to think that they've had alien contact. They're like, no. But I'll let you go ahead.
Well, prior to this extremely awake, conscious, physical experience of contact in Sedona, this was in June of 1991. Prior to that, I really, frankly, had very little interest in pursuing such a thing, and very little awareness that anything like this had happened to me. So I was, living there. I have an investigative nature, certainly, and I study a lot of things, and I pursue a lot of interests. But at the same time, this had a mild interest for me in general, just ufology in general, but certainly nothing that had to do with abduction or contact with ETs or any of that. And I hadn't read anything. I think I'd seen maybe, one or two movies, and that's about it on it. And I don't believe I've even read a book other than some science fiction. But when this thing happened in 91, I was very jolted. I had to leave the area quickly. And then during this contact, I did have company. I had a friend with me at the time who was rendered unconscious during the whole event. But after this, I was quite shaken, and it affected my life deeply. I was looking for trying to find some rational explanation, something that I considered rational at the time. Yeah. And I wanted it to be some kind of psychological or emotional type of, event or episode or illness or something, but I could never find it over the next few years. And the only reason I eventually came in 2005, made the decision to step out, is because it has never stopped. My involvement with this phenomenon has been extremely prolific. The number of contacts, I have a high degree of retention and the ability to pay attention to facts and issues. Part of it's the training in the legal field that I've done working in litigation. And I work with databases and facts and analyze things for case trial, and that kind of a history, plus some of the other expansion. I've studied a lot of sound and light machines, sensory deprivation tanks. I love studying the brain and memory. With a lot of my history, I came back from these experiences over these 15 years with so much information, and I have dozens and dozens of journals and drawings over the years that finally it just hit a point when I could take no more. And I made that decision. I was tired of living with this thing in the shadow of my life.
Well, no, I can totally understand that. I mean, if I had a nickel for every time a contactee told me that, I could have retired a decade ago. It's hard for me because I listen to you and I'm listening like I listen to other contactees, and it's hard on me because I know a lot of the rigmarole that goes along with being contacted, and we're not even talking about the alien part, just the everyday part of living. It's hard to make people understand that contactees still have lives. Regardless of what's going on, they still have lives. They have to get up and walk the dog, go to work, take the kids to school, whatever. I mean, life goes on regardless. And I think that part is hard, the hardest part, because once you accept the fact that aliens are contact, that's probably the hardest part after that is just adjusting your life accordingly. But now, so I want to go back to the awakening experience, to the contact that woke you up on this. I mean, what was it? I mean, what? Let me stop here for a minute before I run around in a circle here. What I wanted to know was, what about that contact? I mean, what was it that just jumped out initially and grabbed you? I mean, other than the fact that it was a contact.
My first experience.
Your first one, yeah.
In Sedona?
Yeah, in Sedona, yeah. I was kind of curious. So what was it you initially seen that got you, well, actually in Sedona, I was completely unprepared for this, and we were camping in a very remote area. And I had gone with a longtime girlfriend of mine, and she and I were just going to do some camping and red rock climbing in Sedona. We were in a van. We were just outside the main area, the Red Rock area, and in a very remote area. Okay, and we were tired from driving all the way from California, so we decided to pull off onto a long dirt road, and we pulled off into a very old, remote kind of camping area without any kind of amenities to it. I think there was, like a couple of picnic tables, a few empty dirt spots to put your tent out, and that's about it. And there was a big creek running alongside, and we pulled in somewhere around 9 o'clock at night, and it was dark. We set up, and I had a creepy feeling that we were being watched, although there was nobody in the area. And again, we were far off any main road. Anyway, I went to bed. In the back, we had a couple of sleeping bags thrown in the back of this van, and it was a hatchback van, a Toyota hatchback, and it would slide. The van hatch split up at the back. And I went to bed. She followed afterwards. We'd left all of our camping goods, material, food. Everything was being around on the ground outside. We set up a little table and chairs. And the next thing I know is I'm sound asleep. She's sound asleep, and I hear a click. I sit up, and the hatch goes up. And I'm sitting up in my sleeping bag, and the light goes on in the van. The hatch is up. The light goes on. I'm just sitting there. And I can't see. My eyes are trying to adjust. Very black outside. And the next thing I know, there was a hand reaching in the van towards me. And it's not any kind of a hand I've ever seen before. It has 3 fingers and a thumb. It's grayish in color, and it's a very long, skinny arm. Well, you're talking about, when you were mentioning the fact that, how difficult it is for us to incorporate this into our life, you're absolutely right. Because what happens here now, first of all, this wasn't something I had a reference for, because I had not been studying this. I wasn't thinking about aliens ever in my life. I never contemplated. I never researched. I never read a book. I was off in other areas with my exploring and research. Anyway, so this arm and hand comes out to me. This is a difficult initial stage for anybody. The shock is beyond trying to wrap your head around this, and your emotions are there. So here your body is filled with adrenaline. I was scared, probably more frightened than I'd ever been frightened in my entire life. My body is filled with adrenaline rushing through. I'm breaking into a sweat. My heart is about to jump out of my chest. And I am looking at this thing, but at the same time going, this cannot be. This can't be happening. This can't be happening. So that's the initial shock I think so many of us experience, especially when it just seems to happen. Of course, looking back in time, I realize now that there were contacts that occurred prior to this, but they were buried in my memory. In this instance, it was so present, alert. I was so awake. Next thing I know, there's like a couple of seconds of a blackout there. Next thing I know, I'm standing at the end of the van,
and I'm paralyzed. I cannot move my body at all. I'm standing up stiff as a board in this little nightgown that I'm sleeping in, and I have my hands straight at my side, and on each side there is what I later came to understand is referred to as a gray. Now, I didn't know anything about grays. I wouldn't have even known how to describe it back then, except to say there was a small little person that looked like a child that had gray skin and a large head. But I didn't know that later on, I realized it was referred to as a gray. Anyway, there's one on each side of me. I can't raise my head up. And yet I feel there's a presence. I know there's someone else standing in front of me. Very tall, very large, a sense of a masculine figure. And we stand there for a couple of seconds, 5, 6 seconds. And the next thing I know, I can feel myself being raised up off the ground, straight up, as though I'm being levitated 3 or 4 inches up off the ground. And I'm barefoot initially. And we begin to move forward. And I cannot raise my head. My chin is almost pressed down to my chest, but I can glance side to side. And as I glance side to side, I can see the tops of the heads of these little characters, one on each side of me, and I can see them off to the side. I can see that I can see a little of the glow of the light from behind me from the van, and I can see a little glow ahead of me, a very bright glow as I look forward with my eyes. Even though my head is tilted, I can see an extremely bright light. It seems like we're heading towards. And the thing else that I can feel before I am rendered unconscious is I can feel something hitting my face as we're moving along. We're moving along. And by the time before I become unconscious, we traveled, I don't know, maybe 10 feet. And apparently we were going into the woods, and something's hitting my face. The next thing I know, and this is something that's in physical experiences for me, there tends to be a real, a hard return to the bed, to the floor, wherever I was taken from. And it's like a big whoosh, boom. And that's what happened. I was sitting in the van. I knew, boom, I'm in the van, and I hit hard. It's almost like I dropped onto the top of my sleeping bag, and I'm just shaking violently. The light's off in the van. My friend, Pamela, is asleep beside me, and I am literally in a state of hysteria. And there's nothing else going on except I'm sitting on top. And those first few minutes were challenging, to say the least. Yes, to say the least. And I was beside myself, trying to find a way to, find a way to look at what just happened to me, because I knew, especially since I'd been working in a lot of different mind states. Some of the studies that I do have to do with different states of consciousness, and I was very, very aware I didn't have a dream. I was very aware that I didn't have anything that I was familiar with that I'd studied before. I didn't have any consciousness. It was real. I could not wake my friend up, and I tried, and that was the return time was around 3:30 in the morning, and it got light out about 10 after 5, something like that. So I sat there unable to get this woman to budge. She could not wake up. She was so out cold. And finally it started getting light around a little after 5, and she suddenly woke up. We went outside, and one of the most, prominent parts of being outside, we'd left all of our belongings, our backpacks, our clothes. We weren't concerned because of where we were located. So we had all the food out, nice material, nice camping material, everything. Everything was there except anything that belonged to me. My clothes, my shoes, my towels, anything that was mine was gone, which was very odd. And anyway, that was my initial experience into the phenomenon, and that absolutely escalated from there and continued.
Now you know why we call it now you know why we call it the awakening. Not to be rude, that's why we call it the awakening.
That is a very rude awakening.
It's kind of a shocker. Well, it's easier when you like if you would have identified some of the stuff in dreams and you would have hooked up with one of the researchers, the awakening would have been easier. But ET is kind of rude about when they need someone to awake. You're going to wake up one way or another, unless you just can't handle it. If you can't handle it, then that's a whole different thing there. And I think we just lost Nadine there. Yes, well, while I'm talking to y'all, we're going to call Nadine back. Don't ask me, guys. Phones are weird lately. They don't want to stop. But anyway, it's dialed on that. But that's when y'all hear me say about the awakening, now you know what I'm talking about. It is kind of rude sometimes in the way the ET just dropped and you're just awake to the world. And you're like, oh, what the hell? What's up with this?
At 949.
We'll try again.
9.
I can't be giving a phone number out on the line there, people. Come on now. We can't be having that. I know. Y'all got y'all's pins out real quick. Let me write this right now. No, shame on you people. Shame on you. We'll give it another chance. If we can't, we'll take a quick break, and I'll see if I can't get her in on her cell. Well, I know you got it, Goofy. I'm talking about the rest of the world. Oh, wait, there it's ringing now. Maybe we'll grab her this way. And,
Hello?
Nadine, we got you back?
You got me back.
That was weird. You just, you were talking, and all of a sudden you was gone. I was like, uh-oh, where'd she go?
Oh.
Anyway, we got you back. That's cool. Ladies and gentlemen, Nadine Lalich, she got abducted there, but they brought her back. Okay? And no, don't take that out of context, ladies and gentlemen. Start writing to us. That was weird. That really was. That was weird. All I said was you said something I was saying about it being a rude awakening, and poof, he was gone. Lately, we've been doing this Contactee special. You're guest 9 on the special. We're doing 20 guests. And, most of the guests are well-known contactees. Some of them are not. I mean, there's a few of them that we're bringing on that are not all that well-known. But most everybody's pretty well-known. And then we're doing the panel shows at the end. And I got to say, we've been getting an enormous amount of unwanted attention. Not bad, just unwanted. Not really bad attention. They just seem to be curious, or mischievous might be a better word.
You're saying as a result of this kind of alliance with this many?
Oh yeah, it's not the first time. I mean, we've done this in the past, and we expect X amount of trouble when we're doing these type of shows. We really do. I mean, we expect some things are going to happen, and I've learned a long time ago because I've been doing the radio side of this for almost 10 years, 9.5 years. It's I've learned when you hit on certain topics with certain guests, you can always have at least 1 or 2 or 3 interrupted phone calls. It's just, we had Thomas Reed on last week discussing his case, and it took the first 35 minutes, we couldn't even get him on the air. His phone just kept disappearing. We went through 3 different phone numbers. He had 3 different phone numbers we were using. My audio was clear and perfect the whole time. Everybody else's audio was clear and perfect, but
I've never had a disconnect like this before.
It's just weird, but anyway, we're not going to worry about it. It's just, it's their friendly way of saying, hey, we're listening. That's how I look at it. We're paying attention now. Before that, they weren't listening. You must have said something about when you woke up that got their attention. Probably about that. I was thinking of what you said about being dropped back in the seat. It really, I've heard Contactee, or I should say about these. We describe this a lot, when there's the shock of reality, the shock of coming back to reality, I guess, or our reality, I should say. And they describe it, and a lot of times it's harsh. Now, of course, things change in contactees and abductees' lives according to whatever they're doing with the ETs and how much ever they're involved with what's going on. But let me ask you this. I mean, you personally now, that's a pretty good experience there to wake you up. You're in reality. This is going on. You're going home, right? What are you telling yourself? I mean, let's say this. Let me do this. Let's skip ahead 4 or 5 days after what happened to you. What's going through your head now? Are you like, oh no? Are you convincing yourself that this didn't happen? Or are you just in a deep closet? Or are you talking to anybody who'll hear it? I'm curious.
Well, first of all, I'm not telling anybody. I'm not about to tell anybody. My one friend she's my one confidant, and I told her only a limited amount, but she was very supportive. I told her that something had happened to me that night. I knew I had been removed from the van. I'm not sure what it was, but see, in those first few days, it was difficult for me to articulate it.
Yeah.
My mental process was focused on finding some other solution. Okay.
Yeah,
by the time I went back to my regular life, I was looking for relief. because I had just mentally gone over this thing so much, so long in that week following, that I just wanted to shut down. I wanted relief, and whether you're dealing with something like this or some other kind of, new awareness you're experiencing as a human being, even in your regular life or your childhood, or dealing with, whatever kind of issues you might deal with, a lot of times that's what we do. We disassociate from it. We put it to rest. But that little bugger is going to keep coming up.
That's why
whatever it is.
That's why so many contactees have alcohol and drug problems.
Exactly.
They're still trying to hide it.
If you are a person, right, and if you're a person who likes to live in truth, and who has a certain kind of lifestyle like I have, I leave no stone unturned. I want to know reality, what's really going on. It's very important to me. And, about reality, the more that I see there is to see. But I did tuck it away, and it would come up because I'd have another experience. And so it was in the first few months. That was in June of '91. By December, I was obsessed with moving to the Southwest, moving out into the boonies. Obsessed all of a sudden. So by December, the urge had grown so strong in me, I couldn't control it. Got an airline ticket, flew out to Santa Fe, New Mexico by myself. Didn't know anybody out there. And within a minute, I was out there. I got to move here. Just got to move here. Flew back home, and in 7 weeks, sold everything, packed up my car, my critters, and off I went to live in New Mexico. And, of course, in a very, 2 minutes you're outside of town and you're in remote areas. So by the time I moved to New Mexico, which was in January of '92, and a year later, like 7 months later, the experiences began to escalate unbelievably. Fear began. I was now checking closets. I was certain I was being watched. I'd find myself out on lonely roads. I would reawaken in different places. I started having missing time. It was so prolific when I moved out into that area that I was able to deny the experience. So at some point I finally said, well, the only control that I seem to have over this, I wasn't ready to tell anybody. I suppose it's an ego thing, intellectual ego or whatever. I didn't want to be judged or seen in a certain light. So I found my power in journaling, and I began to record and became determined over the next few years to try to stay awake and conscious as much as possible, and to try to gather, an investigator and gather information. So I began to fill volumes. And it also it gave me a tremendous emotional relief to have the journal to tell the truth to.
No, it's good therapy. The journals are excellent therapy. I tell this to contactees all the time. It's one of the very first things we tell you, anybody who's waking up, keep a journal, keep a journal, keep a journal, keep a journal. Well, I like to tell them, keep a journal and then go back through a journal every 6 or 7 months. You'll be amazed at how much of that stuff actually starts making sense after a while. Because there's all kind of things in there. Because some journals you'll read and then there'll be it's disjointed in the fact that sometimes because of the type of contacts they're having, the journal might be disjointed. But then when you go back across it over 6 months and you're reading front to back, then you're noticing a lot of stuff does actually go together. It's just the way
you start seeing patterns, making connections. Yeah. Exactly.
No, you do. You see it all up in there, and that's why we tell everybody to keep a journal. And it's the easiest way. It's good therapy for yourself. Just to write it down, to rehash it, to rethink it, to put it in there, to reread it, and it's good therapy to talk about it. I know a lot of contactees are scared to come out and talk about it, but that's why we have online support groups where you can come in. Nobody has to know who you are. You can come in and just talk. Amazes me how many people actually come do it. They just come in and they talk and they tell their stories, and nobody's going to ridicule them because the rooms, we don't allow for that kind of behavior. So it's a good, safe environment to let people talk. And then there's people like yourself and me and a lot of the others who are actually out speaking aloud to the press about this, which takes a little bit more will, I guess, would be a polite way of saying it.
Yes, it does.
But, we're driven. Think about it. You know it. You're doing it. You're driven. What kills me about
it's a process. It happens over time, that process. You've been involved a long time. I've only been out there 7 years talking about it. But once, I decided to put my experience into a book and really address it in this way, and then started talking about it out in public. One of the really interesting things that started happening, I know you know Melinda Leslie, and I didn't know her at the time, and she deals with the MyLab issues, the abduction by military of abductees. I never had an experience like that until, not to my knowledge, until I began speaking out in public.
Yeah,
it was once the book was out in 2008, and then I started talking about it and did a little radio, a little TV about it, talking about it. All of a sudden, one day I have a MyLab experience. Yeah. I have an experience where all of a sudden it's military.
It's really weird you bring that up, because originally when I interviewed Kay Wilson and Mia Haley, that's the impression that I had got. And when I met Melinda Lalich, Melinda and I are pretty close these days, I had told her this. I said, Melinda, what do you think? Because, she was way more in the MILABs than I was at the time. And and I said, well, what do you think? So we both got to digging it, and we have a much larger abduction load and MILAB load than anybody else does. So it was a little easier for us to catch up faster. But it's true. It's just the way it works.
I answered almost 100% of her questionnaire right.
Yeah. Well, she's great. Her and I keep ties. Matter of fact, last time I went on COSA, I invited her to come on with me because we were doing MILABs. That's what the COSA invited me on. I had just done a remake of the Betty and Barney Hill case for the X conference, and Georgia invited me on to come talk about it. So I brought Melinda on with it because her and I were working some joint projects at the time. And but the MILAB thing is an important part of this, and it's important that you brought this up, because most everybody I know who's been MILAB, seriously MILAB, not this BS MILAB where they've taken you, wanted to ask you questions, want to know what you're doing, do you know anything about their technology, whatever they're doing, but they're pretty serious about it. Those are usually people who, like Kay and them, refer to themselves as communicators. That's usually people who have themselves out there, who have a much larger retention of knowledge than the average contactee or abductee.
Yes.
And that's why they're interested. Granted, not everything in their heads is right, but still, the government knows not everything in their heads right, but they know they have a much larger group of knowledge, so that's who they're interested in. So if they can get you and Kay and Leah and Jim and a few others, then they're getting a better piece of the puzzle. See, that's what we do. That's what iCard does. We're the master puzzle. We're the master puzzle keepers these days. But that's what the MILABs are doing. So at least now we know what to look for. We know that sometimes if you're in the military, you may get MILAB. But I think that's more of a convenience than it is a necessity. And then most of the time what we find is when you become quite popular or very vocal about what you know, you'll tend to get MILAB. And I mean, it makes sense to me why they're doing it. I mean, you're the one out there saying, hey, well, I know this, and this about the aliens, and the government's going, well, I wonder if she really does.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's all in the presentation too. It's the way you're presenting things. I know I've met a number of people now that do not have a lot of conscious recollection and are not sticklers for facts and information. Some of us are, some of us aren't. So it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense that those of us that are out there and, determined to be on I have my own mission during these experiences, and that is to gather as much information as I possibly can and bring it back with me, regardless of whether it's a physical experience or any other of the other types that I've had.
Well, you should always be trying to, everybody who's doing this should be trying to gather information. One of the things we teach contactees is how to pre-program their brain at night so that they can do direct questions. It kind of irritates ET when you do this, by the way, so just be warned ahead of time. But you start programming yourself for specific questions, and you do a deep programming after 3 or 4 days, 5 days. The next time they zap you, you subconsciously transmit the question. You don't even realize you transmit it. Most of the time, they don't even realize they're answering it until after the fact. And then one of two things usually happens. Either they're kind of like, wow, did that just happen? Or they're very, well, we'll just say mad and leave it at that. I've had very little response to any
of my questions or any of the interests that I've had or any of the questions that I have posed. I've had very little demonstration that there's been 7 species that I have seen that I can recall interacting with, and I have never ever had them generously offer any kind of information. It's always been on their own agenda.
Yeah, well, it's always about their own agenda, because that's what all this is about. That's the biggest mistake that most people make about this. Humans have a tendency to want to make this about us. This is not about us. This is about them. Anybody making that mistake, is going to be rudely awakened. Unfortunately for us, they've been here a really, really, really long time. This isn't something that started recently. This has been going on in family lines for a very, very, very long time. And to put it bluntly and succinctly, ET has already disclosed to everybody they want to disclose to. They're disclosing the contactees every day and abductees every day. That's the only people they're interested in knowing. As far as the rest of the planet goes, and I hate to say this, I don't think they really care one way or another. I don't think they really even consider the rest of the population on this planet. It's almost like you would consider the ant pile in your front yard. They don't really. They're not. They may allow the government to do this and that from time to time, just so they'll stay out of their own business. But they're not really interested in the rest of the part. They're interested in the contactees.
I agree with you.
Which is scary too.
Have their own research, and that's all that they're focused on.
Yeah, and that's all they're focused on. And whether that pans out good or bad, I would say for the contactees, it'll probably pan out okay. For everybody else, I don't know. I really don't. I'm up in the air on that. I really am. I mean, some research suggests that, and some maybe not. So all I can say, and this is from just watching ET and nothing else, this is observation. They haven't wiped us out, and they haven't saved us, and they haven't made us this ingenious species. So for me, it really comes down to, it's not so much about us as it is about them. And we're part of their agenda. We may get some side benefits, such as empathic and telepathic and clairvoyancies and things along that line, but in the end, it's about them. And I'm just want to know what it's about. Why you've been here for 100,000 years or 200,000 years? Why did you pick up Nadine and harass her? Why did you wake up Nadine? Why didn't you just leave her as an abductee instead of making her a contactee? These are the things I'm really interested in. For you, what is it you think that they woke you up for? Because you were definitely woke up. I mean, you definitely.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, as I look back on my life, I can recall, for example, here's one scene I can recall. I'm about 10 years old. I'm waking up. I grew up in the Midwest in a little small town in Michigan. And I recall waking up one evening in the summertime, walking into the living room, and I had only one other sibling, a brother. My mother and father were in the living room, and they were sitting on the couches, and they were unconscious. And the television was blaring, and the front door was open. The lights were on in the house. It was dark. It was nighttime. And I remember that particular event, walking out there and them being unconscious, sitting. I say unconscious, but let's say they were in a dazed state, sitting slumped. I never knew what that was. Never understood what that was. And I was about 10 at the time. My brother was probably 16. And yet the front door's open. And I just vaguely remember about somebody being at that door or coming in that door. And it's only many years later that when I looked, obviously once I was involved in this situation actively, that I have been able to look back on experiences like that and say, wow, okay, this has been happening. I've just been unconscious to it. First of all, I think that in my case, I can't speak for anybody else. I think that why did they abduct me in that absolutely blatant, open manner, the way that they did in Sedona in 91? Well, my life had evolved. My emotional, my psychological awareness, my intellect, interest, things I was involved in, had awakened to a certain level that had never existed before. I had been very involved in a lot of things throughout my life. I'd been involved in a life. I'd had a very challenging youth. and early years, extremely challenging. They required me to really aggressively address many, many different things in my life, many levels, many emotional states. I have a lot of therapy. I was in programs. I was doing a lot of work. Well, somewhere around there, about that time in my life, I had come to a place of what you could call resolution in many ways. And my journeys of self-awareness had caused me to start. I used to go to Ann Arbor, one of the University of Ann Arbor, and I used to go to the facility they had there where they had sensory deprivation tanks. And you would go in these tanks and experience a detachment from all of your senses. And you float in these tanks. They're very high tech there, and you spend about 90 minutes there. And there you float in 500 pounds of salt water. It's body temperature, and in these tanks you can have accelerated learning. You can have all kinds of experiences in these tanks, states of consciousness. Anyway, I'd done that. I'd used sound and light machines. I had worked with a number of things with my mind to help me to be able to retain information, to access my brain in different ways. I always had a fascination about that. So by 1991, I'd had a lot of really interesting things I had done, studies and exercises and practices. And I don't know that it was instigated on their part. In other words, they thought, well, now we're going to wake her up. I think what happened is that I was ready to be awake. I think that I had developed my consciousness, my awareness personally in my own path to a place and a level where I wasn't going to stay asleep anymore. You know, we evolve we human beings, you know, in our life. If we're lucky and we're really aggressive about personal growth, we can evolve to different levels. And develop abilities. We can develop parts of our brain psychically. And I think I just had gotten to a point where I was a relatively aware human being about my own self, my own processes. I had a great deal of self-awareness. And I think when this happened, it may never have been, but because of who I had become at that stage in my life, and as aggressive as I had been about personal development, I think that's why all of a sudden, bing, the lights went on, and I was present.
Well, that's I got a good bit to do with it. I mean, that's, you know, as far as we can tell, your own awakening experience in your own life helps. And the fact, somewhere along the line, what they started doing is they started testing you to see. And it's probably not, under hypnosis, and it may even come up in conscious memory one of these days. Somewhere they started testing to see how well you could handle this in an open form, meaning and being open about it. They started letting you remember more and more and more. And they may have even gone back a few times and wiped it and done it again and wiped it and done it again, because E.T.'s very funny about who they let out. Because literally, there are tens of thousands of contactees. There's only a handful that actually publicly speak. Out of the probably 10 or 15,000 that have contacted us over the last 3 decades, I can only think of maybe 24 that publicly speak. And out of all the rest that none of us know nothing about or will ever know about, you've got to wonder why it's such a select few. And I really do think a part of it is that you become conscious enough that when you're dealing with them, you can deal with it. It doesn't, right. It freaks you out, but you don't go crazy. You don't end your life over it. You keep your everyday life going. And matter of fact, most of us adjust our lives according to them, like becoming self-employed or something along those lines, so that we can even push these agendas. I shouldn't say agendas, but push these knowledges and research more. And it's really weird. See, for me, it's easy because I see it every day. But for anybody listening to the radio show, they're going, "Oh, Joe's nuts." You know, Joe's actually been seeing it for 30 years. A little different for me. You know, it's just today alone. I mean, you'll meet contactee number 9 I've talked to you today. So it's a little different for me. 3 of them were famous, 6 of them are not, but still, it's a little different for me. And I in listening to you speaking, and I said this with Thomas last week, I hear this over and over and over from this group of people. So Now, the kicker is, what color eyes you got? What blood type do you have? She goes, damn, that's a personal question. You don't have to answer, mind you, okay? I asked everybody that because it's part of a blood type study we're doing right
didn't
now.
I mean, I don't know if
I thought you submitted
or not.
No, I thought you submitted. I thought I remembered it, but I was going to ask you anyway because I'm just curious on the air. But you don't have to answer. Some people
I don't know my own blood type.
Shame
of all the things that I know, I do not know my own blood type, to tell you the truth. My eyes are blue.
Find that out for me one of these days. Just email it to me. You ain't got it. The reason why is I thought I had seen it, but I'm not 100% sure. The thing about it is we've noticed now they are definitely messing in specific bloodlines. It's not that every bloodline doesn't get abducted, because everyone does, but in reality, the rare blood types are abducted much more than the non-rare blood types, meaning the Rh negatives are abducted on a magnitude much larger than the positives, even though positives make up 85% of the blood types. That's what nobody realizes. Right now on planet Earth, all the Rh positives make up 85%. The Rh negatives only make up 15% of the world's blood types, but yet make up over 70% of the contactees.
Wow.
So there's definitely a reason for it. And they found out recently in other things that some of the negative traits are a little different than, it's a mutation. Rh negative is a mutation. It just popped out of nowhere 25,000 years ago. There was no negative before that.
Really?
Even science doesn't know where this came from. It was a mutation that came along, and it's at the same time green eyes came along. It's another mutation. Green eyes and O negative blood, and it's like O negative is a universal donor. There was no universal donor before O negative, but all of a sudden, we've now got a blood type that everybody on the planet can use. Isn't that just weird? Even science is like, because we're dealing with 3 doctors with this case, and they're all like, ooh. And when I started thinking in aliens, because professionals are, they're like, oh, wait a minute, you're saying alien? I'm like, give me a better explanation, doc.
After this show, I'm going to grab at my medical files and take a look and find out what my blood is. I can't believe I don't know.
Well, somebody just wrote in, well, I'm A positive and I'm a contactee. Well, yes, you are. We're not saying because you're positive you're not a contactee.
Right. Yeah. But you know what? You're right. We look at patterns. It's really a matter of, you get a lot of information, and that's why, I do work on done a lot of legal database and taking in a lot of information and correlating it to each other, and that is an interesting thing. So I love dealing with percentages. So when you say 70% of the contactees that we're aware of have this certain type of blood, that's significant.
Yeah,
that definitely doesn't say everything, but it is significant. Those are the things that's the stuff I like to look at.
Yeah, well, we got a lot of that stuff, like the November just finished the personality quiz. There was some rather interesting findings come out of that. She's in the middle of the reptilian questionnaire right now. The great questionnaire is up, but since she put it up, another 200 great contactees have wrote in. So that stuff you'd love. I'll have to get you involved with it. We got stuff like that laying all over the place. We're in the middle of 10 different studies right now that we're trying to do something no one's ever done. Well, first off, we've already cataloged more contactees than all the researchers combined out there. Secondly, we're taking all the data, all the commonalities between them all, so we've got abduction criteria. And then on top of that, we're correlating against what type of ships are being seen with the reptilians, the grays, the humans, the light beings, whatever it may be, against what type of abductions are going on, whether good, bad, in between, what you might expect at 5, at 10, at 12, at 20, at 30, at 40. Our car's a much different beast than anything before. It's a whole different world. But now, anyway, getting back to what we were talking about, where are we at here time-wise? We still got a few minutes before the break. After the break, maybe I'll open up the phone lines and maybe I won't. We'll see where Nadine and I are when we get back after the break. Now, before we go to the break now, the next conscious, all right, I just can't speak tonight. The next conscious experience you had after that one, how long apart? 5 years, 10 years, 20 years?
Oh, heavens, no. Oh, my goodness, no. No, I've those first few years were very prolific. And, boy, I've had, when I was living in New Mexico, within the next 6 months, I had several intense experiences after that. One of them where I actually lost time, like an hour and a half. That was my first experience of losing time, and I was on a lonely road, and came back and when I came back, I was placed on an entirely different road, facing an entirely different direction. So I would say my throughout these years, particularly, I'd say the first 15 years, I would say I like percentages again. So I break the types of contacts down into about 4 different types. The most, the top of that being the fully conscious. And I would say that my fully conscious contacts are probably maybe 8 to 10% of what experiences I've had, which is still quite a bit because I record everything.
Quite a bit,
yeah.
It's a lot of information.
Yes, it's a tremendous amount of information.
I don't think most people realize that how much. I was having this conversation with Jim Sparks about how much information, how much time. I don't think most people who are listening to us understand how much information you can gather with an hour of conscious or 5 hours, whatever. And then I don't think most of them realize how much time that we don't remember, how much time is gone that none of us even remember about. Jim and I were talking about, because he was telling me about 90% recollection. I was like, yeah, I mean, it's great when you remember that much stuff coming back. And then we got to talking about how many hours, actually physically being taken. So, like he says, he remembers 90% of what he remembers, but then anything else he doesn't remember. That's just the way that works, unfortunately, for all of us. I don't know what it is, Nadine, why they don't want to tell us everything, Or maybe they do and they just wipe it out because we freak. That might be what it is right there.
Well, or maybe they just don't care about how we perceive it or relate to it or anything. Because, again, back to the fact that it's their agenda, not ours.
Yeah,
they don't need to tell us.
That's a good point. Yeah, and they really don't. They with the Greys, I notice more so than the other two species, they tend to be, it's not that they don't have emotions, they just tend to be really, really standoffish. Like, look, I'm sorry, we got to do this. I don't want to be doing this anymore, and you want this being done to you. But it's going to happen.
Well, the feeling about the Greys is strictly automaton. I get the feeling that they are I've always had the feeling that they are just sort of a programmed race that are just sort of going along as they're directed with very little volition of their own, and also some kind of unified connection amongst them.
Well, there's 9 varieties of Greys. That's the trick. The thing about it is, a lot of people mistake them for other aliens, but there's actually 9 types of Greys. And yet, the way you're saying it, they're all interconnected. Well, we found out the hard way. First off, there's the 2 types of the 3-foot Greys or 3.5-foot Greys. There's one that's there's one that's kind of I'd like to call him a cyborg. He's like part Grey, part machine. He doesn't look like a machine, but he acts like one. Right. There's another one that's much more just alive. Then there's the 5 to 6 foot ones. Sometimes they're gray, sometimes they're brown, sometimes there's white. Then there's the 7 foot ones. They all look pretty much the same. They're just different in height and a little bit different in size, and there's 3 or 4 different colors. So, and then we found out about the blue plasma when the Greys are feeding. Sometimes they may look like a cobalt bluish gray, and sometimes they may look almost translucent because the less food they have, the clearer their skin becomes. These are things we just found from repetition, asking contactees these same questions over and over and over and over, and it's weird. I mean, so it's kind of strange. So then they seem to be, and I can't prove this, mind y'all, ladies and gentlemen, but the Greys seem to answer directly to the light beams. They don't, because I noticed something in some of my own personal contacts and some recent contacts we've been talking to with some reptilians and humans. When the 5 or 6 foot Greys are around and the 7 foot Greys, all the other aliens give way, including the government. No one gets in their way. Everybody kind of bows their head and moves back. So apparently they're much more in control than we realize. Yeah, the reptilians call them the peacekeepers, for lack of a better term, because from what I hear, the reptilians and humans can't stand each other. So maybe that's what they are in reality. But then, see, that's what gets so confusing, because the little 3 foot Greys, when you're dealing with them, it's like you're dealing with some kind of just unsentient whatever. They don't seem to be very, I don't know how to explain it.
They're not very present.
They're not very present, but they don't even really seem to have any personality or anything else. They just seem to be there, I guess is what I was trying to say.
And yet, isn't it odd that we can recognize if they're male or female?
Yeah, that is, because you can, personality-wise, you can tell when they're in your head. There's I don't want to say a softness. I don't know what it is, but you can tell. Mm-hmm. You can tell between the two. But anyway, we're going to stop right there. That's a good cutoff point. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in about 10 minutes. Nadine and I are going to go take a quick break. Y'all hang out, listen to some music, get some coffee, get a Coke, whatever. We'll be back in 10 minutes, so please stay tuned.
You're listening to UFO Undercover with your host, Joe Montaldo, right here on the Paranormal Radio Network.
And had some sort of loud verbal display challenging ET in general out in the middle of nowhere?
That's what I was doing. I actually had a pistol in my hand at the time. I was really ticked off. When I was having this fit, I was waving the gun in the air, okay, and I had this fit. And at this moment, I said, okay.
Was a Louisiana man named Montaldo. Folks around called him Six Gun Joe. Works with ICAR, don't you know? Investigating UFOs. Out for a drive with a gal one night. They stopped to check out the reporting site. But an alien lit right there on the ground. Commenced to throwing his weight around. Now, old Six Gun didn't take too kindly to that kind of thing. Especially without Vaseline or anything like that. Seriously. Well, Six Gun looked that critter right in the eye and said, any last wish before you die? Yours? Reached for his gun, quick as a twitch, said, fill your club, you son of a bitch. Now, a legend spread across the land about this pistol-waving man. But if you're from space or from Earth below, you don't give no lip to Six Gun Joe.
Welcome to UFO Undercover with your host, Joe Montaldo.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to UFO Undercover. Like Natasha says, I am your host, Joe Montaldo. Our guest tonight is Nadine Lalich, and I got to say she's been fantastic already tonight, even though I keep butchering her name, even though she told me how to say it right. When I mess up, this is one thing you'll learn about me over all of us you follow this, regardless of what it is, I make a mistake, I take credit for it. Because look, I'm only human. I'm going to mess up from time to time. Actually, ladies and gentlemen, Nadine and I were talking just before we came back live. We were talking about NIRLABs and why the government may or may not need to take, NIRLABs. I mean, for the general listener audience, what do y'all think it is? I mean, why do you think they're snatching people like Nadine, or why do you think they're snatching other contactees for the information? I mean, if they knew everything, they sure wouldn't need to pick us up. They could just leave us alone and stop aggravating the hell out of us. So, I don't know. What do you think, Nadine? I mean, we know it's some kind of information they're after, and we know that the contactees such as yourself that are having more recall are the people they're after. I mean, that's who they want to talk to, so I can only conclude that they're looking for answers, just like we are.
Well, where better to get information? Now, I'm sure that different branches of the government have the ability to, they employ certain types of techniques to be able to access our neural pathways in our brain. We know that it's been a long time that the government has employed different kinds of techniques, mind-altering, mind-bending techniques to either gather information from someone or to promote some kind of information into a person. So it's not a strange concept that they can do that they could also abduct us and they could try to get information from us. But when you think about it, especially those of us that really are committed and becoming more skillful at retaining contact information when we have these experiences, I mean, we're going to see things, say, for example, on the inside of a craft. We're going to see technology. We may or may not be able to ascertain motives and agendas of off-planet beings. So it would really, I just really think it makes a lot of sense, a lot of times, our military, if it's particularly military involvement, they're thinking they go slam it, bam, they're going to go head to something. But this is not a situation where I can't even imagine, even if the government or various governments on the planet is indeed in conscious contact with various races or some races in some manner, they're still only going to be able to get limited information. Still, because they're made up the way that we are. They have the same physiological building makeup that we have as experiencers. That's what the military, that's what the government has. We're all human beings here dealing with these off-planet life beings. We all have limitations. In other words, the point I'm making is that, say that there's certain branches of government and military that are involved in a direct cooperative measure, supposedly, with an off-planet species. They still are going to have some measure of, question about whether or not they're being altered in their contact. What's to say they can't be altered to some extent? So they're not going to get the absolute scoop. They're going to be subjected to certain measures just like I am or you are as a contactee and abductee. So they're going to still want to gather as much information and correlate it as possible. And especially from those of us who don't have any particular agenda, who are being abducted and contacted, we're going to maybe be a more pure source of information because we're not coloring it with our own needs or agenda when we have these contacts. But the more information, the better.
Well, here's one for you. This was somebody wrote into me. It's a true statement, but it's kind of funny the way they worded it. They wanted to know how come Billy Myers and all of the peace, love, and light Arcturian contactees aren't being milled. I can't say that on the air, guys, because this is a G-rated show, and I'll get in trouble. I'm going to leave that alone. Well, Nadine can answer you. I got to be high quiet now.
Well, I'll tell you. First of all, I believe in only speaking from your own personal experience. Okay.
That's right.
So, yeah, that I know. That I can definitely stand up and qualify. It's an interesting experience because when Barbara and I wrote the book, Alien Experiences, she has dealt with a lot of experiencers, contactees, abductees that have had friendly contacts, that have had contacts with Nordics or various other races that they believe are very spiritually enlightened and want to spiritually enlighten the population of the planet. And it's taken me a while, but I've come to the place of, okay, that's very possible. Why they didn't take me, I don't know. I would have much rather gone down that aisle. So what I've come to understand is that obviously there's many races that have been in contact with the planet, in contact with humans and abducting humans over a long period of time. Just as on this planet, if you were to go across our planet, you're going to find all these different countries. All these countries, the population of different countries, the different governments, they all have their own agenda. They all have their own, each culture has a different perspective within humanity of the way that they look at things. It's pretty amazing how different one particular culture can be in comparison to another on this planet. So it makes sense to me that if we're dealing with multiple races that come from other dimensions, other off-planet sites, they come here, they're all going to have their own agendas. And so therefore, so those that I have personally experienced, 7, I can say that there was just one of them, only one of them, that did not appear threatening or have a particular agenda, and it was only a one-time encounter that I had. But I do believe now, and I've come to accept the fact that, there are some races that have entirely different agendas that may be for the enlightenment of the planet. I just don't have any experience of that at all.
For the enlightened people, y'all.
Right, and mine would be, why would my labs want to be, why would the government be interested in dealing with people who say, oh, it's wonderful, it's great, it's terrific? That's not what they're looking at. They're looking at those of us who believe that they're going to be among us, or they are among us now. They're looking at those of us who are having contacts that say, wait a minute, I've seen a reptilian species that is apparently very aggressive and a warrior. So they're going to, the government, branches of the government, if they're involved in this indeed, would certainly be more interested in what we would have to say than what, say, somebody that is being, their contact brings greater spiritual enlightenment. The government's going to be looking for conflict, for potential conflict, for potential disturbances on the planet, and so they're going to go for us. That's how it seems to me.
Well, it's strange. I mean, it's always been strange to me when people bring those kind of contacts up to me, because really, for me, I look at it from an evidence and a proof standard, and really, there's not much in the way of that. And I've said this 100,000 times. For the peace-loving lighters, just look at the planet, people. I mean, it don't take much to look around and say, well, hell, what kind of enlightenment is this? These aliens need to get off the crack if they consider this enlightenment, by the way. See, I can be kind of mean about that. Other than that, I mean, it's, like I said earlier, I judge the aliens by their actions, just like I judge people by their actions.
Yes.
And so far, their actions are not what I would consider, we'll just say they're not honorable and leave it at that. Because even in the peace-loving lighters.
Exactly. Well, no matter what, if these contacts are not invited, and these contacts by any species with humanity, any of these contacts are forced upon us against our will without even giving us the opportunity for consent, they're wrong.
Yeah, they are, 100%.
They're a violation.
I say to all my friends that write me about their good contacts, I said, did they call you on the phone and say, hey, Bob, I'm going to come pick you up today. I'm going to take you a swing around the galaxy. We're going to chit-chat. I'm going to introduce you to some other ETs. I'm going to drop you off. I said, did that happen? Well, no, but the experience was great. I said, but well, wait, they just came and took you without asking. They took your kids without asking. They took your wife without asking. I said, that's illegal in this country. I mean, we put people in prison for doing that. That's enough to start a war between two countries, and I'm thinking it's not acceptable. Regardless if I find myself in a keeper role or communicator role with the ETs or not, I'm still griping that they're taking me against my will, even though these days I know when they're coming.
Exactly.
I know well in advance when they're coming, but still, they're not calling me on the phone and saying, Joe, I'm stopping by.
Isn't it when you can tell that they're coming?
Oh yeah. Still freaks me out, by the way. But that's just one of those things. Now, I mean, we've been seeing questions coming in all over the place. Let me see. We're going to jump back a few of them here. Let's see. This one came in from Sandman. It's about they want to know, it said, can we wake ourselves up during the contact, and why are some people picked up so much more than others? Well, that's a good question, Sandman. What do you think, Nadine?
All right. The first part of the question was again
can contacts wake themselves up doing the contact? Shake themselves awake.
All right.
or drag yourself
So
out.
I think it takes a tremendous amount. First of all, you've got to conquer your fear.
That's a big one.
Fear can be immobilizing. I had an experience where I was absolutely certain that I even asked for it. I can stay awake. I can be present for this. I'm ready to be present. And then when I had a totally present experience a few days after that, I was not ready. So I think it takes you have to really be in control of your emotional state. But I cannot tell you that I've had control once it started. For me, what happens is that I tend to be aware and alert in the beginning. And so in the very beginning, the only way that I could exercise my personal power here was to fight becoming unconscious and going into that altered state. I would fight it. And that's where I've had my success. I have been able to maintain a higher degree of consciousness and awake alertness for a longer period of time as the event begins. Then sometimes it seems during the event, there's a spontaneous moment where I can wake up out of it. I don't feel that I have control in the middle of it, but then I will sometimes, maybe because they're exercising less control over me at that moment, so I awaken a little more to my surroundings. But basically, my greatest control comes in the beginning in being able to hold on longer before I surrender into the altered state. That's what happens for me.
Well, no, that actually makes sense. I've heard other people describe it that way as well. You know, anytime I talk to anybody like yourself that does have conscious recollection on a regular basis, because, you know, most contactees, it's a battle to get information out of them. I mean, it's talk to get 5 minutes of anything, and half the time you end up having to use some form of therapy, regardless what it is, to get some kind of to get some information. And for me, that's more of a waste of time than anything else, because I found over the years, even with all that effort, you get very little information, and a lot of times what you get is really not usable. So for me, and most researchers, it's important to find the communicators, the keepers. The communicators are people that are out there communicating ET. Now they're not so much communicating for ET as they are just communicating about ET and what's going on in their personal lives. Some of them are more pro than against. It just depends. And then there's the keepers, and the keepers seem to be, in a way, they work with the aliens. It's somewhere along the line, these people have decided to get whatever it is that they're looking for, whatever answers they're looking for. They help them with the hybrid children. They help them when people come on board. They help with the younger contactees when they're on board. That's why a lot of times children talk about seeing grandparents and stuff on board ship. That's why, because they did. They seen grandmama. She was one of the keepers. And it's one of these weird things that we hear about a lot inside of those ships. So we know these kind of things going on. We know the government's interested in those people, the ones that are out talking about it and the ones that seem to have some kind of working understanding with ET. But even then, even with all those people, the information is still finite. It's still limited. I shouldn't say finite, it's just limited. It's just, there's a lot, but then there's a lot that you got to go, whoa, wait a minute. What is all of this? And how come is it that every contactee sees a different end than every other contactee? That makes me crazy. What do you think? I mean,
what way?
Well, you know, when you hear contactees talk about what they think is coming, future-wise.
Oh, right.
Everyone is different. It doesn't matter who it is. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's just in between. But everyone, it's enough to make me crazy. I got to be honest with you, because you know, I got all this baseline stuff. You know, in other words, meaning like I know particular contacts happen in particular age groups. We know that from puberty up to about age 28, most of the breeding experiments and most of the stuff where they're pushing your limitations are done. That's why most of that stuff isn't ever remembered. That's why we also tell contactees you don't want to remember that. But we also know going in the 30s, contact changes. In the 40s, contact changes. We become more self-aware. We understand more of what the aliens are doing. We become more conscious of the programs, the people around us, the other people involved in the programs. We just simply are becoming more conscious along the lines here. So, you know, all of that seems to be common. But then when you start asking, what do you think? Oh, no. And then it's a whole other thing. which tells me right after that, E.T. lies pretty damn good, to be honest with you. Because some of these things that people are coming up with, I'm like, where are they getting this from? You know, and I ask them, I'm a researcher, so I ask them.
Mine has been consistent as to what I've seen repeatedly and what has been alluded to me repeatedly.
Yeah.
And you're right, when the fact that they orchestrate various scenarios, that they have a way of tampering with our memory and our neural processes to coerce us or make us believe something is happening, it makes you very skeptical. It really does. But I think also if you pay attention for a long time to this, and you really, like I have, you really pay attention, I start to be able to differentiate between what I think is really going on and what they want me to believe is going on.
Yeah.
And I am more able now to be able to discern the difference. When they're
because you realize there was a difference. No, I'm sorry, go ahead, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just said because you realize there was a difference. Most contactees don't. I was supposed to be in my head. Go ahead, finish what you were saying.
And so what I'm talking about is, say a scenario is set up where they're creating during a contact a situation, and because they're so obsessed with our emotional makeup and trying to they covet it, however it is that they do, and they're so obsessed with it, they create these scenarios for us where they create these situations where they want us to believe that we're seeing somebody who's passed on, or seeing an ex-love, or a child, or this or that. What I notice over time is I can tell the difference very quickly now. I'm able to see the difference between that and those rare moments when I believe I'm really getting real information from them that they want me to see. And the only reason they want me to see that is because they want me to play a part that will serve them when that real thing happens.
That's true.
Otherwise, they will play that. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, finish what you're saying. It was just when you said that, because I've heard it before, but go ahead and finish what you're saying. I didn't mean to interrupt you. That's twice. For some reason, my brain is not thinking in quiet mode. I'm just saying it instead of just thinking it. Well, it's one of them damn habits when I'm talking to contactees. It's almost like an empathic, telepathic thing. Anyway, it's a bad habit when I'm talking to contactees. I need to break. Because I got to remember we're doing interviews and people are going, why does he keep doing this? Tells people I know it's coming out of her mouth half time before she says it. That's why. But only because I've heard this or experienced it myself. It's well, it was like when you were talking about. See, to me, it's important that you brought up the fact that you realized there was a difference. Most contactees don't realize that most of what they're being told or shown is garbage, and they're not. And I think ET does this intentionally to, basically just separate the chaff from the wheat. I really think that's what it's about. I think that's what they're doing. They're going, well, look, she figured it out. Well, that idiot over there didn't. We'll just let them think that they're the second coming. Whatever. They can go on. We don't really care if that's what they want to think. Fine, So I really do think that's what ET's looking for. They're looking for the people who can discern between what's really going on and what all the rest of the garbage is. And I got to be, when you said that about the event coming or really event coming, it's one of the things with the core groups we work with, they really do think there is something coming, and they do think there's a large group of contactees that will be here to serve a specific purpose, which, I'm not going to get in tonight, but they do. It's a big group, and I'm really surprised when I hear other people talk about it, because it's they call them core groups because they're groups of contactees that tend to cling together, whose ideas, thoughts, and designs are really, 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 really close together, like that group of the Holocaust group. They make almost a full third of contactees. It's a bad term, Holocaust, because it's not a Holocaust in what humans would consider it. It's more like maybe a culling might be a good way of explaining it, or maybe a culling and a sharing might be a good way. I don't know, but it gets really strange. But so now, when I hear all these different scenarios from contactees, I'm very skeptical, because frankly, we have really good data these days. So when people come in and tell me, oh well, the beautiful alien came and brought me down and enlightened me and is enlightening the planet. And I really, when I say that, I always want to go, well, send them to me. I want to be enlightened by some beautiful alien. I really do.
Right.
I'm sorry. And I'm not being a smart. I know y'all think I'm being a smart ass, but I'm not.
Are they being convinced that is what's really good? Are they being convinced, or somehow are they being controlled with? I mean, let's face it. If you believe those were all lovely, wonderful contacts, you'd be much more willing and much more cooperative.
Oh yeah, much more cooperative.
If you had your own mind about it and it wasn't along the same, you didn't have the same agenda they did, it's much more difficult to control you. So no. And plus, let's face it, none of us are comfortable with this. We don't want this to be happening. And so, it's no different with having this contact with a non-human entity. That kind of contact that is not, is put on you, that you have not invited, is no different than, say, being, a human being here being attacked by another human being. Child abuse, or being held up at gunpoint on the street, no matter what it is. They've found, studies with humanity, what happens with human beings is that, we connect with our perpetrator. We draw alignment, emotional alignment with our perpetrator in order to make the crime that's being created against us, perpetrated against us, in order to make that crime acceptable. We actually, on some level, align ourselves emotionally with our victimizer. It's a real well-known human trait, and it's a survival trait. So it's not so strange to think that a lot of these that are, levitating with the happy aliens, and I'm not saying it's for all of them, but there could very well be a portion of them that they're much more comfortable with that scenario.
Yeah.
And that's how they learn to live with the experience.
No, I agree with that.
Painful, difficult, challenging event to have in your life.
And it is, and it's always why when I hear him talking about it, I'm like, well, but it's like the first time I started doing research, everybody used to tell me about these transformers and these shapeshifters. Man, I couldn't wait to meet them. And then I'm interviewing these contactees when there's a group of, I think it was 12 of them. 12 or 14 of them, and there was like 6. They said there was like 6 aliens present. Well, at first there was one gray present, and then there was 6 different types of gray present, and then there were 6 different aliens. And I realized what was going on. What the grays are really good at this. I'm pretty sure the humans and reptilians are pretty good at it too. What they do is they just scan your head, and they take a combination of what's in your head and what's in their head, and that's what most humans see. I doubt most humans ever really see the real extraterrestrials, because most humans describe the human type aliens looking a lot like us, when in fact they really don't. According to the Egyptians, the Sumerians, and the Nazcans, their heads are quite a bit longer than ours are. They're narrower than ours are. Their eye colors are different than ours are. They're way taller than us. They got 6 fingers and 6 toes. They're a whole different species. And when you're looking at them, you can tell they're a different species. And the problem is so many people are seeing both. They're seeing the ones that really look like aliens, and then they're saying, oh no, but it's the same alien. They're describing the same craft and everything. So all these aliens are doing is they're just making them think that, and which is probably cool. I mean, I guess I just don't like being lied to, is what it comes down to.
Certainly makes everybody more controllable.
Actually, saying that, I think she said she's seen 7 types. That's what you said earlier, 7 types, right? I just seen the question go by in one. That's why I was asking.
7, yeah.
Yeah. Now, hold on, where did this question go? Kimberly writes in from Kimberly, where are you from? Quebec. She wants to know if you could make all this stop and go away, would you? Well, that's a question I was going to ask, Kimberly. What do you think, Nadine?
Well, that's an interesting question now. Boy, nobody's ever asked me that. If I could make it stop now. Well, I think I crossed over somewhere a point of no return. I went through years of feeling absolutely traumatized and victimized by this. Then I moved to the next level of absolute anger and rage. How dare they? Especially for someone where I come from and the work that I've done. My life has been about balance and peace and being grounded. I'm out there contemplating many things and have a vision for many things. But my feet are, I'm very conservative. I like a certain amount of,
Stability.
predictable life. But at the same time, as this has progressed, I'm on the other side of something now, and it's a very interesting place to be. It's like, I want to know. This isn't anymore. I mean, do I like the contacts? No. They've slowed down, to my knowledge, considerably in the last 6-8 months. But I am almost developed some kind of a fierce determination to gather more information. It's my way of fighting back. Would I stop it? I'm more prone at this point just to show up and see what happens.
See, that's my problem. If you'd have asked me that question 20 years ago, maybe 30, I'd have probably said yes. But today, I'd have to say no.
Yeah, because, I feel responsible. I know it sounds crazy, but at this point, I've met a few people now in this, in ufology around here now. And I've met a few experiencers, abductees. And I realize everybody brings, if you are willing to stand up, be a voice, and start to really look at it and talk about it, write about it, we are in the extreme minority. And those of us that are able to really clarify things, write about them as accurately as possible, the field needs us. It sounds a little airy-fairy, but the truth is that I've come to a place now where I feel a sense of responsibility to my fellow abductees, to humanity at large, that I realize and recognize that there is some role, some part here that I have to play in my own personal evolution as a human being and a spiritual being, that this came into my life. And that it has been, it's become a big piece of my life, a focus of my life. And I've been very involved in all kinds of service work in my life with, people and animals and all kinds of different work I have done, here on this planet in humanity. And suddenly this has become something else for me. This has become a bigger calling for me, where here I am. And you know what? I was expecting that I was going to have, when I stepped out and I started talking about this at large, I was expecting that people, say in the law firms, people that I know, I was expecting ridicule. I was expecting, disbelief. I have been utterly and completely amazed to find how well received I have been by people that I never would have anticipated it. So everybody has something different to bring. And at this point, my determination to unravel the mystery, my desire and commitment to be of service at this stage of our humanity and however I can is probably greater than my fear of continued abduction. And I feel the need to report for whatever it's worth.
No, that's a good thing. If you ever hear the intro song for this show, you'll know how I feel about that. They wrote a song about, it's called Six Gun Jail. They wrote a song about one of my experiences when I went out to a place where there was lots of contact. I had an absolute hissy fit, man. I was hot. I had enough. It even says it in the song. I had enough. I wanted some kind of closure. There was certain things I wanted to know. I was just refusing to do anything else. It was one of those disaster nights, but it was an insane night itself. I got a show coming up where I'm going to be interviewed. I'll actually probably talk about the experience itself, but it was rather interesting to say. I just got mad. I had enough of it, and I really wanted to know I'd been in the field at that time 20 years, and I'd been knowing my own experiences for like 14 of those years. So I was hot. I wanted something. I wanted to know some answers, and
it's like anything. After a while, it takes you, and now you're at the helm of it, and now I'm not a victim anymore. I refuse to think in terms of being a victim. I may not be able to stop this experience, but now, I certainly don't look at it as anything good. But at this point, I feel like I am one of the people who is on the forefront of something. I'm not being subjected to it as a victim anymore. Now I'm on the forefront. I didn't choose to be here, but this is where I'm at. So what am I going to do with it? I'm going to try to bring greater awareness to the whole subject matter if I can. I'm going to be one of those who's willing to be an information gatherer and start to find out what's going on.
Well, and that's what you need to be. I mean, that's what needs to. All the contactees need to be like that.
Right.
You need to get out there. They need to pay more attention. Good.
See, that's one of the things I realized, though, is that when I think that's the next step for me. I'm working on another book right now. I think the next step for me is assisting other experiencers by sharing my experience of transformation in this thing. How I went from being a victim to being an absolute assertive gatherer of information, researcher. I want to delve into this mystery in every way that I can, how I've strengthened myself and preparing myself for more and more awareness and more contact. And, I think there's, having come to the place where I'm not afraid anymore is an amazing place to be not afraid after having been utterly terrified for so many years. So I think there's a lot of people that continue to wake up to this event in their lives, and I think they need support. I think they need a support system. So I think that's going to be part of what my work will be down the line in helping encourage and support those people.
That's what ICAR started as, was a support. Our goal originally was to bring abduction research into ufology. Of course, it was kicking and screaming, but still. I used to beat Stephen Bassett over the head with it. Richard, anybody would listen. Richard Dolan, Stan Friedman, Kathleen Waldron. Come on, I had the courage to rewrite the Betty and Barney Hill tape. I wasn't going to let this go. And at first they tried to ignore me. They really did. But I got a really big mouth and I got a big radio station, and you're not going to ignore me for long. So we've been forcing our way in, and by setting up that support group initially, that's where we meet our contactees. We keep. Right now, it's open right now. We keep a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week support group online, open for any contactees that want to talk anytime. And there's almost always somebody in there. Well, the radio station room stays open 24 hours a day, and the iCar room stays open 24 hours a day. Now, you're going to usually find more people in the radio room because they're listening to the radio, but Sundays, Thursdays, other days when we're doing support groups, you can find them in there chatting. And that's really what it's for. It's a place for people to talk safely and not be ridiculed and not be attacked. And if they want to make a report, fine. If they don't want to make a report, fine too. It's not a big deal, And as far as we prefer that people don't give us anonymous information because we would rather have the information because it makes it more credible. But
absolutely,
we do accept them. I mean, we do accept anonymous reports, but it goes into the pile of anonymous reports. I mean, because that's what it is. And if it correlates with some other stuff, it'll get used. If not, it'll be, there's a lot of stuff we get that sits there because there's not a place for it. It's an oddball.
Right.
Or it's an oddity. And we're keeping it just on the outside, like Charles Hall's Tall Whites. Until him, I had never heard of the Tall Whites. And when I met him, I told Charles, I'm like, I don't know, Charles, maybe you were programmed by the government. Maybe that's what it was, some kind of experiment. But then out of the blue, I had 2 state troopers contact me out of Las Vegas, who had seen these guys in the casinos when they were working details. So now there was, and then there was 3 cab drivers that came in that drove these guys around. So then there was 5 coordinating reports. So, it always makes a difference. But
right.
I'm still skeptical. For me, I'm going to be totally honest with everybody. For me, there's the reptilians, the grays, the humans, the light beams, and the brown guys, the little ones they say that eat you. Those 5 type aliens, there is solid, tangible proof for them and their spaceship. The rest of them, it happens to be who you're there with, what you're doing with, and what they may be doing with you. But those are the ones we know for a fact that abduct in large masses. We know that because it's just from the contactees. All the rest of them, God only knows what they're doing. And from the way the Grays explain it, there is a limited amount that they let come to the planet. It's not just an open policy. They're not just letting everybody and their mama come visit Earth. There is a limit to what they'll allow here and what type of aliens they'll allow here. Because frankly, some of their races aren't ready for us, just like we're not ready for them. And some of them probably aren't as advanced or as good at hiding things as these races are. And come on, we're already busting these guys out, So if you get somebody here that's sloppy, that's another reason you can limit. I know everybody wants to think there's 56 and 60 types, but you can really limit the types by the spacecraft and by the overall, you can really limit it. So, but then people make mistakes too, because we know, like with the grays, there's 9 varieties of grays, there's like 6 varieties of human, there's like 11 varieties of reptilian, which all of them are amphibians anyway. So, I mean, this is all stuff that right there, just between those 3 species, there's 20-something types. So I can see why a lot of people think there's more aliens than there actually is. And then there's some other types that interact with these guys. Sometimes we're present, sometimes we're not. I have no idea what that is, Nadine, why. Sometimes we're allowed to see it and sometimes we're not, like the light beam. I don't know why some people are allowed to see them and some aren't. You know,
Right.
And you just got to, and then the damn light beams can take any shape they want, so you don't even know what the hell you're looking at half the time. That's another thing that drives me crazy. Between the light beams and the rest of them, their telepathic abilities, you always got you wondering, what is it you're actually
Well,
seeing?
I think it's a good thing to be skeptical, to question your own self, to question your senses all the time, and to correlate, like you said, going back into the journal, being able to look at what you wrote last month, last year, and to be able to really, you know, that is the only way, by continuing to record your information in as much detail as possible, that you can come up with a general overall view of what's going on. You can't, not one piece of information or one story or one recollection is not going to tell the story. It has got to be a collection moving in a certain direction.
And
I question myself all the time.
Well, no, that's the best way to do it. I do it. See, for me, I have to do 2 things. I have to question myself all the time, and then I have to shut my own self off when I'm doing research on other people, so that what I'm thinking is not interfering with what I'm thinking about their case.
Oh, exactly.
Because a lot of times their cases aren't relevant to mine. Yeah, so.
Exactly. And it's important not to, one of the things that I realized I think was very important for me, a very important aspect of my continuing to move through this territory, was realizing that I did not have to come to an absolute conclusion about anything.
Yep.
That I'm slowly but surely pondering and considering information, experiences, and slowly but surely developing a hypothesis about what I believe may be going on, who's here, what the intention is. It's a slow process. It's not something you can come to terms with immediately. And so that I like that, because what that allows me to do is, rather than coming to any kind of conclusion, which I believe is foolish, because not only are we having our senses altered as experiences, during these experiences, there's a variety of experiences. People are having experiences that I'm not having. So it's much better for me to maintain an open mind, and to just continue to collect the information, process, look at patterns, look at percentages. I don't know if in my lifetime I'll come to an absolute conclusion about what I'm certain is going on.
No, I don't know if there is any absolutes in this.
No, but what I am certain is that I absolutely do believe they are among us now.
Oh yeah,
I believe they are off planet. I absolutely believe it now. And just there are some absolutes for me now that I believe.
Because some stuff is fact now. I mean, you can't get away from some of the facts. See, somebody asked me one time, "Do you believe in aliens?" Well, my answer is always no, because for me, it's not about belief anymore. I've seen them up close and personal enough times that it ain't belief. Look, I was there. I know I was there. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. I was there, so it's a fact.
Right.
In my mind, it's a fact.
You know that you know.
If people get mad at me sometimes about it, well, it's true. I said, this is not religion. We're not talking about God. I believe in God. E.T., I know E.T. exists. I know E.T. is visiting the planet because of research and personal experiences. I know this just like I know I'm sitting here drinking a Coke talking to Nadine on the phone. So there's no difference in my reality. For the rest of them, of course, yes, there is, because they haven't had this experience, and they're all looking at me going, or looking at you going, mm-hmm. And are they going to babysit my children? I don't think so. Just
right.
And then it scares me, because when I think about some of the upcoming stuff that I've heard about or been involved with or talked to other contactees that have talked about, I get a little worried for what I would like to call the everyday people. I just got the worst feeling that it's not going to end well for them. Just one of those
if you're not prepared, but if you're not prepared, the problem
that's a good point.
It's with any kind of catastrophe of any kind, any magnitude, what happened down in New Orleans, what's just happened in Japan, what could very well happen here soon in California. If we just look at what's happening with our weather alone on the planet, and you're not prepared, if you've got information but you don't want to look at it or consider it, if you're not prepared, that's a big part of it. We already know the planetary conditions. Anybody that got their head in sand, maybe not, but any average person just turning the news, and even the limited amount of truth they give us on the television or the radio, the limited amount we get from, the basic news, still tells us that we're in times of crisis, and that doesn't make sense. Let's prepare. Let's think ahead. Let's create some, plans, some different avenues to consider for our lifestyle, for alternative lifestyle. I just came back from, I spent some time with Melinda Leslie and Kim Carlsberg there, and they just started their UFO tour business and in Sedona, and I got a chance to go out for an evening with them. They've been there just starting up, and I'm looking at land. I'm looking for off-grid. I'm looking for just another place to have. That's my choice. It's for several reasons. One of them is that, there may be some things happening to particularly where I live in California, and I'd like to have an alternate route, an alternate possibility. So it's planning. And I think that's true for any of this. Those people that don't believe this is happening, they don't even believe that an earthquake can happen, let alone the fact that we could be visited. So they're not planning for anything. So those people prefer to live their life in complete ignorance. They will be hit the hardest on all levels.
Yeah, well, that's the sheeples. The sheeples are going to get shaved. That's all I can say. There's so many people that live with their head in the sand. It's not even funny. Especially with the disasters that have been hitting the planet over the last 5 or 6 or 7 years. I've been watching people. For us, this tells you the difference right here, ladies and gentlemen. This is an easy one for you. Katrina, for our family, was an adventure. I live in New Orleans. Okay, we got up. We said the hurricane's coming. We went and spent 3 days in Florida. We came back. We gutted our house. We moved back in. We hooked up our generators. We had the first office building up and running in the city of New Orleans, and the first apartment complex our company did, me and my partner Sam. That's a lot to boast about, guys. And you know what? We had a good time. So it's a big difference in being prepared for something and not. All those people downtown New Orleans who weren't prepared for anything, yeah, they weren't prepared. They expected the government to bail them out. The first big mistake they made was relying on the government to save them. You've got to, in today's world, you've got to think about saving yourself or you're in deep trouble.
That's right.
We have a good family of survivors, and we're real good at this kind of stuff. So, like I said, it's pretty easy for us. But that's not everybody. But Nadine, you've been great. I know we're almost out of time. Guys, Aaron, give them the site a couple more times so they know where to find it. It's going to be linked on our site for another week, but just so they can find you easier. And before she does that, Melinda and Kim, if y'all are listening, stop scaring the aliens in Sedona. I'm coming down here, so stop scaring them off. Go ahead, Nadine.
Yeah, you can find me at alienexperiences.com.
I got to give them a hard time. Melinda is really a good friend of mine, and I've been giving her a hard time for years. And Kim, I just like to make crazy because of her.
So I got to spend some time with those night vision goggles, the military issue they have, her and Kim.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I've never seen anything like it. I could get addicted. We went out and we spent about 3 hours out there last Saturday night on one of the plateaus there in the heart of Sedona. And let me tell you, the things I saw, I could not believe. Easy to rule out things like satellites and shooting stars, but we really saw some amazing things.
Yeah, there is some really good stuff. I was hoping for them they would get that new airport monitor system out there to make their jobs easy. See, here in Louisiana, there's a system that tracks all aircraft for a 100-mile radius of the city, and it's public access. So it tells you if it's military or if it's commercial, if it's private, or if it's a helicopter or if it's a damn weather balloon. It'll tell you what it is. They got that, and with the JPL, we can rule out everything in the skies in a matter of 2 minutes and know if something's not supposed to be there. And it's a really nice thing. It's just they're not everywhere in the country yet. But I'm going out there to torture Melinda and Ken. It's coming. It's a matter of time, ladies. Just know I'm coming out to Sedona. I'm coming out to cause trouble, too. Oh, I got a bunch of friends down there. I got a bunch of friends in Sedona. I'm going down and causing all kind of mischief. Invite all my friends in from California. We're going to come down there and cause all kinds. Well, I haven't been down there, what's it been, about 4 years, I think. 4 or 5 years. It was right after Katrina we went down, because we were in, we went up to Laughlin, actually, for the conference, and we stopped off in Sedona on our way up. And because I wanted to see what everybody was talking about.
Right.
It's really pretty there. It really is. It's a gorgeous place to live. I would move there, but I think I would starve to death. I'm a contractor. There's not, there's some building going on there, but there's not enough. So I'm thinking, no, not yet. When I get a little bigger, I'll have to move there. But then it might not be nice if it expands out. But if you get down there before I do, give both ladies a hug and tell them I said hi.
I'll be back next month.
Yeah, but they're both a blast. And what's else? Oh, Stephen, if you're listening, I'll be bugging you soon too. He's oh, you see, but like him, this is an interesting point, ladies and gentlemen, before I let Nadine go. When I met Stephen 10 years ago, 11 years ago, Paula Harris too, by the way. Neither one of them wanted to entertain the idea of abductions. Matter of fact, I brought Paula on my show one day, and she told me if I brought up alien abductions again, she would quit talking to me. She quit talking to me for a whole year over this.
Whoa.
And then I seen her in Roswell, and we made up, and we hugged, and then she started endorsing us. She was on Karen Dolan's show endorsing us as the only organization for abduction research. So that was a big turnaround. And Steve was the same way. Steve was nothing. Now Steve, talking about doing experiencer conferences. I asked us who we could get involved. He's realized, which most researchers should realize, if you want the truth of alien contact, if you really want to know what ET's doing here, the only place to go is to Contactee. The government's not going to tell you, and I doubt they even really know, and nobody else knows but ET. So the only other place to go is to Contactee. I never understood why this was so hard for researchers to understand. I never did understand that. And they fight it tooth and nail. And I can understand some people, but some of these contactees, frankly, are nuts. But in reality, there are
manner of expression, yes.
Yeah, there are some excellently credible contactees in the field these days. They're excellent speakers. They have good credentials. They're clean. They're not nuts. They're living everyday lives, and they're very convincing when they speak. And there's simply no reason for these people to be lying about this. There's no logical reason that they would be lying about this. So there are good witnesses out there. It's just, you ever notice what makes the news medias or the thing? It's always the crazies.
Yeah.
They don't want the real contactees. They are the woo-woo people. And they don't want any credible abductees or contactees on CNN or Fox. Because, God, if a real credible one gets out in the world can hear, wait, she's not alone. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Y'all been telling us they're all crazy people. Wait, she's not crazy. What's going on here? They don't want that happening. We might get support then. But again, Nadine, you've been fantastic. I know we're running over to Kevin Smith's time now, but you did a great job, and I'll be looking forward to speaking to you again. Any contact information, anybody want to get hold to you, where can they reach at?
alienexperiences.com.
Pretty easy, guys. alienexperiences.com. Click alienexperiences.com. It's pretty easy. Well, no, because, I have iCall1.com. I believe in, and if you want to get people to come see you got to be as simple as you can be, because something that's in the head, Yeah. If you start getting these big, long URLs, they look at you like, okay, I'm not typing all in that in. Screw that idea. But anyway, thanks again, Nadine. You've been fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, next week, Jason Wilson, former host of On the Bridge Universe, will be interviewing me about my own personal contacts. I've only ever really talked about my own personal contacts like 3 times in 10 years. And this will probably be the only time I do it for another 4 or 5 years. So any questions you have, that's the show to get them in on. That's all I can tell you. I don't know where he's going to take the show because I'm just the guest. I'm not the host, so it's entirely up to him. Until next week, people, enjoy your lives. Hug your kid. Kiss your cat. I promise you, if you smile, your face won't crack. I promise. Good night, everybody. I'll see y'all next week.
We have a lot of stuff where
Welcome to UFO Undercover with your host, Joe Montaldo.
Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone's having a good afternoon, a good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are on our beautiful blue planet. Guys and girls, I know I say this every week, but I love doing this show because we go out across every time zone on the planet. Every time. We don't miss any time zones. We have someone listening in every time zone on Earth right now, which, by the way, I want to tell all y'all thanks ahead of time because I do enjoy it out there. And for the people who are staying up and listening to us early in the morning or late in the evening, thanks, guys. I mean, it's really cool because I know, some of our UK audience and our US audience, it's between 1 and 3 in the morning for y'all. So I know y'all are staying up, and I can see the server numbers. So I know y'all are listening and enjoying the show. So, again, thanks for all my friends down in Australia who I know are taking their afternoon tea time to check us out on the radio. I appreciate that. Well, for all of our American listeners and South American listeners, guys, it's just always great to have y'all on board. Tonight's guest is going to be Nadine Lalich, and actually, I've been hearing about Nadine off and on for years. It's not the first time I've interviewed, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. There is another archive tape up there that y'all can go find. But still, I find it to be very, very interesting. Now, also, before we even get started, for anybody who wants to catch up with this conversation, you can go over to alienexperiences.com. And a lot of Nadine's work, a lot of information about Nadine is right there on the site, so you can get in, take a look at it. Take a good look at the site. That way, when you get into the conversation later on, if you want to put your hand up or call in and ask a question, at least you'll know what you're talking about. Nadine, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Why don't you, let me get you to tell the audience a little bit about yourself and why you're involved in all of this. Go ahead.
Well, I was dragged kicking and screaming into this research, actually. I am a reluctant experiencer, but I'm happy to say after about 7 years now of being actively involved, I've moved through all of the anger and the fear, and now I'm just, absolutely committed to unraveling the mystery as much as I can. And so after a very startling conscious contact in Sedona, Arizona in 1991, that sort of opened the doorway for me, and tucked it under my bed and hid it away, the experience, for about 15 years until finally in 2005, I'd had enough of the experiences, and I sought out some assistance and some camaraderie through MUFON, where I met Barbara Lamb. And in very short order, within a couple of years, we did the book Alien Experiences together. And now I'm in hook, line, and sinker into this great mystery.
Well, it's definitely a great mystery. There's no doubt about that. As much time and money as so many of us put into this, it's kind of nightmarish to actually think about it sometimes. Now, but for you were just going on through life. I mean, you knew about this one experience in your life, but you just, like I said, I heard you say you kind of buried it, you put it away, you put it night for a while, and you just went on with life. Now, what I wanted to ask you here is, was there like a nagging sensation? I mean, was there an overwhelming, what was it that actually drug you back, I guess is what I'm looking for, or drug you into the field is what I'm looking for. I mean, I know the experience is what it is, but what along the line of, I guess, in time actually pushed you back into that direction? Because I know a lot of people, like you said, fight this kicking and screaming because they don't even want to think that they've had alien contact. They're like, no. But I'll let you go ahead.
Well, prior to this extremely awake, conscious, physical experience of contact in Sedona, this was in June of 1991. Prior to that, I really, frankly, had very little interest in pursuing such a thing, and very little awareness that anything like this had happened to me. So I was, living there. I have an investigative nature, certainly, and I study a lot of things and I pursue a lot of interests. But at the same time, this had a mild interest for me in general, just ufology in general, but certainly nothing that had to do with abduction or contact with ETs or any of that. And I hadn't read anything. I think I'd seen maybe, one or two movies, and that's about it on it. And I don't believe I've even read a book other than some science fiction. But when this thing happened in 91, I was very jolted. I had to leave the area quickly. And then during this contact, I did have company. I had a friend with me at the time who was rendered unconscious during the whole event. But after this, I was quite shaken, and it affected my life deeply. I was looking for trying to find some rational explanation, something that I considered rational at the time.
Yeah.
And I wanted it to be some kind of psychological or emotional type of, event or episode or illness or something, but I could never find it over the next few years. And the only reason I eventually came in 2005, made the decision to step out, is because it has never stopped. My involvement with this phenomenon has been extremely prolific. The number of contacts, I have a high degree of retention and the ability to pay attention to facts and issues. Part of it's the training in the legal field that I've done working in litigation. And I work with databases and facts and analyze things for case trial and that kind of a history, plus some of the other expansion. I've studied a lot of sound and light machines, sensory deprivation tanks. I love studying the brain and memory. With a lot of my history, I came back from these experiences over these 15 years with so much information, and I have dozens and dozens of journals and drawings over the years that finally it just hit a point when I could take no more. And I made that decision. I was tired of living with this thing in the shadow of my life.
Well, no, I can totally understand that. I mean, if I had a nickel for every time a contactee told me that, I could have retired a decade ago. It's hard for me because I listen to you and I'm listening like I listen to other contactees, and it's hard on me because I know a lot of the rigmarole that goes along with being contacted, and we're not even talking about the alien part, just the everyday part of living. It's hard to make people understand that contactees still have lives. Regardless of what's going on, they still have lives. They have to get up and walk the dog, go to work, take the kids to school, whatever. I mean, life goes on regardless. And I think that part is hard, the hardest part, because once you accept the fact that aliens are contact, that's probably the hardest part after that is just adjusting your life accordingly. But now, so I want to go back to the awakening experience, to the contact that woke you up on this. I mean, what was it? I mean, what? Let me stop here for a minute before I run around in a circle here. What I wanted to know was, what about that contact? I mean, what was it that just jumped out initially and grabbed you? I mean, other than the fact that it was a contact.
My first experience.
Your first one, yeah.
In Sedona?
Yeah, in Sedona, yeah. I was kind of curious. So what was it you initially seen that got you, Well, actually, in Sedona, I was completely unprepared for this, and we were camping in a very remote area. And I had gone with a longtime girlfriend of mine, and she and I were just going to do some camping and red rock climbing in Sedona. We were in a van. We were just outside the main area, the Red Rock area, and in a very remote area. Okay, and we were tired from driving all the way from California, so we decided to pull off onto a long dirt road, and we pulled off into a very old, remote kind of camping area without any kind of amenities to it. I think there was, like a couple of picnic tables, a few empty dirt spots to put your tent out, and that's about it. And there was a big creek running alongside, and we pulled in somewhere around 9 o'clock at night, and it was dark, and we set up. And I had a creepy feeling that we were being watched, although there was nobody in the area. And again, we were far off any main road. Anyway, I went to bed. In the back, we had a couple of sleeping bags thrown in the back of this van, and it was a hatchback van, a Toyota hatchback, and it would slide. The van hatch split up at the back. And I went to bed. She followed afterwards. We'd left all of our camping goods, material, food, everything was sitting around on the ground outside. We'd set up a little table and chairs. And the next thing I know is I'm sound asleep, she's sound asleep, and I hear a click. I sit up, and the hatch goes up, and I'm sitting up in my sleeping bag, and the light goes on in the van. The hatch is up, the light goes on, and I'm just sitting there. And I can't see. My eyes are trying to adjust. Very black outside. And the next thing I know,
You're listening to UFO Undercover with your host, Joe Montaldo, right here on the Paranormal Radio Network.
Show me the truth to me.